All right. Welcome everybody to WorkTango's webinar series today. Thanks for waiting a moment or two for people to fill in. I looked up and there were 0 people. I looked up and there's about 135 and still some people filtering in. So I got some people already saying they're excited for this on the chat. That's amazing. People are excited, which is awesome. So just from an introduction perspective, actually, I wasn't going to do this today, but why not? I like Christian got me excited for this. So if you have one word to describe how you're feeling today, throw it in the chat. It'd be nice to kind of get everyone thinking and focused on today's presentation. But we're really excited to have you here. This is something that we do every single month. We bring on passionate speakers to talk about things that, again, they have a really good experience in and passion in, and really want to share that with our WorkTango community. I'm Rob Catalano. I'm the co-founder of WorkTango, and typically bring on these speakers, ask a couple of questions, and be your voice throughout the process. And we'll get into questions at the end. A couple of people are awesome, optimistic, ignited. Someone's nervous. I hopefully you're not too nervous. Tim should be nervous. He's the one speaking. Excited. So awesome. We got some people on here all ready to have a good time. So if you don't mind switching screens, Tim. Before we get into Tim, we did want to mention is this is something we do every single month. Next month in August 27th, we're conducting one on how HR and people leaders can create an LGBTQ2+ inclusive workplace culture. So if you're interested, definitely register for that. And we've probably done, oh my gosh, I'd say about 20 of these in 2020 so far. So there's a bunch of on-demand ones on our website if there's ever any interest from some of the great speakers we've brought on in the past. So more of just a heads up, there's some more information out there. Tim, if you don't mind going to the next page. Wonderful. So one thing we do a little bit different here with our WorkTango webinar series is we want to make it interactive. So just a few quick points. If you've been here before, sorry for the repetitiveness, but if you have something from a chat perspective, you want to give Tim a thumbs up for a great idea, or just want to cheer him on, or you have issues with audio, there's a team here to help you anything from a chat perspective. Some people are caffeinated, interested, happy, and curious. I like that. Someone's working on brewing a cup. Amazing. So for all that stuff, that's great in the chat, and you can see that in your Zoom client. For any questions, please put it in the Q&A. What'll happen is if something juicy comes up, I'll chime in and ask Tim to give a little more color. I'll also be looking at those at the end. We'll have some time to get into questions, a pretty valuable part of the way that we do these things. So we just want people to participate, and knowing this group, especially looking with, just under 200 people here, I don't think that's going to be an issue. I think we're going to have a lot of great conversations. And just a heads up, we typically don't get to them all, unfortunately, so I'll apologize in advance, but I'd rather have people engaged versus not doing anything at all. So hopefully we can have a great hour together. Last thing I want to do before getting going here is introduce our speaker. Tim, do you mind going to the next slide? There we go. Your image looks the same. I know when I was doing COVID and my images on social media, it was two complete different worlds. But I wanted to introduce Tim Magwood. Tim is the co-founder and partner of 1 Degree Shift. And it's funny, when I was looking at Tim's bio, the first line said, Tim is a purposeful and passionate trusted advisor to CEOs and executive leaders committed to sustainable personal and organizational shifts. What's interesting is I don't like reading a lot of bios, but the first line of his bio really kind of stood out into what I know in terms of working with Tim in the past. I've seen his passion firsthand, and I think that was the great part of purpose and passion as you had there. He has conducted, over the last 6 years, 60 culture transformations. That's a lot of work. I don't know what else you do, or where you find time to sleep or do sports or anything like that, or your family, but we brought Tim here because of his great experience in this world of culture transformation. And we're excited to hear what you have to say today. Last thing I think that really stood out about Tim is that you probably see on my shirt, Improving Work Lives, that is our WorkTango passion statement. We don't have a mission statement because we believe missions end, but we have a passion statement. And when we read 1 Degree Shift's why, it was advancing humanity through work. And it was just found that there was so much collective kind of thoughts and passion in what we did. So I'm pleased to have Tim on today. Tim and his team was an integral part of building our virtues at WorkTango. We call them virtues, not values, but similar thing, and really excited. So, Tim, take it away. The floor is yours.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. Actually, first a question for you. Why did you call them virtues versus values?
Yeah, so there's this, I won't get too deep into it, but there's the Bushido, which is a Japanese kind of methodology. Basically, it was around virtues as being things that you do versus values being what you believe. So
Mm,
in the idea of values not being something sitting on a glossy sheet of paper or on a wall, we wanted to build something that was actually going to be more about what people did, right? And that whole Bushido culture is built on that concept, and they leverage virtues as well. So we thought that, you know, we already have a passion, not a mission, a bit different. Why don't we do something that's really going to stand out, really describe, you know, to our employees what it means. We found is a really good way to position it based on, you know, what we believe.
love it. Virtues.
Cool.
Well, thank you to the WorkTango team, to Rob and Stephen. I'm excited to be here today. I know we got a few hundred people as part of this webinar, and I'm super passionate about culture and aim to make a difference. So I'm really excited to be here. So the topic here today, and I have about 35 minutes of content or so, so we should be able to get lots of questions, and Rob might ask a few questions as we go. But the topic is leading transformational culture shifts. So transformational culture shifts, and our approach is assess, align, activate. So maybe that's one of the things you take away from today, which is the approach to culture transformation work being assess, align, activate. I just want to speak into very quickly transformational, because some of you may be looking and say, hey, Tim, what do you mean by that? Transformational, to me, there's sort of a few key things. One is it's organic. So it's more of an inside out process. So you can think about any change, transformational change you've gone through in your life. It's more of inside out. It's more organic. It's a bit messy. We need to say yes to the mess. So it's organic. Second is it's purpose and values driven. So I think that has always served us when we guide our clients. And the third is it's sustainable and strategic. So it takes you from a place to a place. There's a from and to state that's sustainable. So organic, purpose, values driven, and also sustainable, strategic. So let's get going. Let's dive in. This is a little quote just to kind of get us going here. I think most of us, since there's a lot of HR leaders in this group, business leaders, HR leaders, we know the famous Peter Drucker saying, but we at One Degree Shift actually believe that culture will eat strategy, not only for breakfast, but for lunch, for dinner, for snacks. It's an always thing. And it's also shaped by the worst behaviors the leaders are willing to tolerate. So in fact, when we dig into culture work, we really try to look for, notice, create conversation around those bad behaviors or those worst behaviors. If we don't dig into them, then we're not going to purge them out of the system. So that's something to work or to think about. There's a quote. So our conversation today, sort of three main outcomes, if you will. One is connect. Why does culture leadership matter for you? Why is it important? And maybe just write down one intention for you today. So Rob asked you the question, you know, how are you feeling? So maybe one intention for you today to come into the conversation. You've carved out some time for you for learning. So whether it's energize, whether it's listen, whether it's presence, whether it's curious, whatever it is, just write down one thing so that we can really have a really strong connection today. The second is to learn. So I'm going to share with you a proven process that we've used with 60 plus clients now, 7 principles and practices. So just like Robin WorkTango calls virtues, they're what you do. I think what I'm going to share with you today is super practical. So these are things that are not only principles, but they're practices that can help transform. And third, I'm hoping to inspire you a little bit. Transformational culture work needs to be inspiring. It needs to have energy. So I'm hoping you're going to get one big thing, maybe 2 things that you're going to be able to take away, put into action. So just to level set, what is culture? So you could say culture is how we do things around here. It's about how it feels to work around here. It's about what people are doing when they're not being watched. It's the invisible. Here's a simple definition. It's the values, beliefs, behaviors, and systems that guide and define the ways of working with a group of people. So it could be a team, it could be a family, it could be an organization. And one of the things I'm going to really share and dig into today is that there's the beliefs and the behaviors, but there's also the systems. In transformational work, we need to look at both. The beliefs, behaviors are of the people. The systems are what bind the organization together. We really need to tackle and look at both if we're going to create transformational and sustainable change. A little visual to think about is a tree or as a forest. So cultures or organic cultures are dynamic. They're always shifting, just like a tree or a forest. And a lot of times leaders will look at just the foliage, the choices, the behaviors, what can we see, what's visible. That's important. But in my experience, what's even more important is what's underneath that, what's at the trunk, what's in the roots. So if you think about the trunk and the big branches, those are the values or the virtues. And then in the root system, those are the beliefs. We really need to get into a healthy trunk and root system and examine it and make sure it's healthy if we're going to do meaningful transformational culture work. A couple quick data points. PwC here, 84% of leaders believe that culture is critical to their organization's success. But this is the one to notice, and it's actually bumped up in the last few months given COVID. 60% of leaders think that culture is even more important than their strategy or their operating model. That's actually been bumped up. That's quite amazing. So the how we do things is more important than the what. The how of culture is more important than the what. And if you're not familiar with this body of work, and if you're looking to work with your CEOs or COOs or business leaders to invest more in culture, this is often a body of work that I cite. There's a great book called The Firms of Endearment, not The Terms of Endearment, not that movie a while ago. It's The Firms of Endearment, AKA FOEs. That's that orange bar in the middle. A study of 30 organizations in the US from 1998 to 2013. And these are purpose, values-driven organizations that really prioritize the employee experience. And those FOEs outperformed in 15 years, 98 to 2013, they outperformed the S&P 14-1 and outperformed the good to great 6-1. So great culture is not just a nice to have or woo-woo, it actually drives business performance. So FOEs, Firms of Endearment, great book, and a bunch of book summaries and articles on that.
Sorry, Tim, just to clarify, which book is that?
It's called Firms of Endearment.
The book's actually called that. Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, so Raj Sisodia, so we can include that in the follow-up. Rob, we'll include a few book ideas, but that would be one of them. It was co-written by Raj Sisodia and John Mackey, who's the co-CEO and one of the founders of Whole Foods. Yeah.
Awesome, thanks.
So I just want you to take 30, 40 seconds right now and just kind of get grounded in, and maybe, for context for you today, if you think about your organizational culture, or it could be your team, if that's more appropriate. So choose your business organization or your team, and just think about and maybe write down a couple of words on why is culture development important for you now, July the 23rd, 2020. Why is it important for you now? What comes up? And what's missing with yours? What's missing? So you might write down maybe some energy, or maybe there's some silo mentality, or maybe there's a lack of accountability, or maybe a lack of clarity. So if there's a bit of a lack or a bit of a missing, what is that? So why is it important? What's missing? And also write down a number. So how much of a strategic asset is your organizational culture out of 10? So 10 is world-class culture, completely aligned with our strategy. People are dialed in, they're energized, we got great work-life balance, we're light, we're cooking. That's 10. 0 is it's toxic, it's fear-driven, I want to leave tomorrow. That would be 0. So how much of a strategic asset is your culture for your people in terms of growth and in terms of organizational growth? Just write a number and maybe put that down in the chat. I'll just give you 15 seconds. I'm really curious, Rob, about the numbers that you're seeing.
A couple of folks had a couple of ideas like trust, unconscious bias, transparent communication, but some of the numbers that are popping in now are 5 to 7, 6 to 7, 4. Okay. So I got an 8 there, which is nice. A couple of 8s, not a 9. Kind of mid-range, I think, would be a good average. I'm looking at there.
6 would be about average. There's a 4 and there's a 9, but there's okay, good. Wherever you are is where you are. My next question for you would be, wherever you are, if you're a 4, you're a 9, what would be the one thing that you need to do for the next 3 to 6 months to dial it up, like bring it up a 0.5 percentage point, or 1%, from an 8 to a 9, or a 4 to a 5. So just a few questions to kind of get you thinking a little bit. Why is it important? Where are we today? How much of an asset is culture? And these are good questions to ask executives to just get the thought process cooking. Let's keep rocking. So I just wanted to share our what we call cultural code at 1 Degree Shift, because this is the work we do, and it's also super helpful for every organization to have a cultural code. Ideally, it includes a why. So our why, or higher purpose, evolutionary purpose, is advancing humanity through work. How do we help make organizational culture more human, more compassionate, more creative, those kinds of values? That's our why. Our 3 foundational values are be real, that's about be candid, that's that whole radical candor world. Be grateful, appreciation, #1 key ingredient to being happy, and be playful. Our culture work can be heavy, so we need to bring in some lightness to it. Those are our 3 foundational values. And then our growth values invite love and fear. Yes, we use the L word in our cultural code. Invite love and fear. We need to invite that into our world, learn and share, and strengthen our community. So we believe in having a culture code that has whys and has hows that really inform how we want to operate in our business. And those are some of our great clients: tech, manufacturing, some associations, media, hospitality, education, etc. So I'm going to share with you this model, and then I'm going to do a little quick story for context, and then we're going to explore these 7 practices together. So this is a model that actually took us a few years to craft based on a bunch of experience. Because my experience is that less than 10% of CEOs have a process or have a conscious way of curating culture or transforming culture. So this is what we've learned. At the high level is we want to make sure that culture is strategic. It's strategic, and it's how do we hook culture to the purpose, the why, but also to strategy. So let's look at culture strategically rather than programmatically. Next, assess. And there's a bunch of ways to assess, and I'm going to share with you our favorite way to assess here is let's assess the culture, let's measure it. What are some root cause challenges? What's getting in the way culturally? What might be getting in the way systemically? And the systemic inhibitors are at the bottom there in those orange systems. So whether it's org design or comp or performance management, there's usually 1 or 2 systems that are not aligned to your desired culture code. So look at it strategically, assess the culture, measure it, align around a cultural code like the one I just shared you, our 1 Degree Shift one, then do some development around attitude and skills, and then look to what to activate from a systemic perspective, but also from a behavioral perspective. So everything I'm sharing with you today fits into this model somehow, into this assess, align, activate methodology. So I'm going to share with you a little story because I'm a big context guy, and the world we live in right now with COVID, in the 4th industrial revolution, it's really informing the kind of cultures that are being asked for. And I use that intentionally because I think that's what we need to do as leaders is we need to pay attention to what is being asked for in the culture. So I'm going to share with you this little perspective. It's a couple minutes long that taps into and gives us context of 4th revolution. So here it is. So we are in times of unprecedented change with COVID, with Black Lives Matter, all kinds of change. But at one time, things were seen as impossible if you think about it, from just standing upright to lighting fires, to electricity, to motor cars, to skyscrapers, to even sewing clothes. These things were all impossible at one time until people like you and I came along with innovations, with ideas that transformed the impossible to the possible. There have been many small, some large revolutions over the last few hundred years. Let's very quickly look at 3 of them, actually 4 of them, in the world we live in today for context. The first industrial revolution, early 1800s, decreased our dependency on hard animal and human labor. It was fueled by coal, by biomass, and it really changed what we could do, what we could make, and it moved us away from a local agrarian economy. The second industrial revolution, late 1800s, fueled by a wave of devices like electricity. We had the assembly line. We started to create efficiencies. Some economies of scale started to become more of a global economy. Pace of change speeding up, more than just incremental change, but more exponential. The third industrial revolution in the late 1980s, early 90s, of course, fueled by the internet, by storage. It started to create breakthrough capabilities, robotics. We started to make things with robots that were much faster and cheaper than we could with animals or with human labor. And we've got storage, so it changed the game. This was breakthrough. Well, now we're at the beginning of, a few years in, what social scientists are calling the fourth industrial revolution, which is the digital and cyber physical one. This revolution is changing the game for good. It's quantum. We can come up with, it's about robotics, it's about, of course, AI, about machine learning, and we can come up with ideas and convert them from ideation to something that's real within nanoseconds, within days rather than in years. So we also, though, have this revolution in consciousness that isn't being talked about as much. It's going on inside of ourselves at a very individual level, at a community level, and at a global level. So welcome to the fourth industrial revolution. We're still during COVID, and diversity and adaptability and wellness are what is at a premium in our workplace cultures today. So I just share that with you because fourth industrial revolution and the times we're living in, there's many meta level shifts that we need to pay attention to that are informing the kinds of cultures that people are asking for. So just a couple of questions to engage you in here. You know, how has COVID impacted your culture? Have you noticed some shifts? Are you shifting? And how does your culture need to evolve to be more heartful and tap into that human side that's really being called for? And we want to be in times of change. We want to have an inspiring growth mindset. So one that's above the line, one that looks at the possibilities, and one that looks really and focuses on service. So here I'm just going to now outline 7 principles and practices, and then we're going to kind of unpack them. So the number one is around assess. So back to that model of assess, align, activate. How do we measure our culture like it's any other part of the business? So how do we measure it so that we can have those business-oriented conversations with our CEOs and our executives? I'm going to share with you just a couple of quick headlines on Barrett's. It's the partner that we use that we think is great because it looks at it from a values lens. And it's also a proxy for trust. So we believe that trust is the real currency of any great organization. Number 2 is about how do we clarify a culture challenge statement, or what's the problem with the current culture? What do we need to shift? I think that's always a great place to start. 3 is align. So how do we align around a cultural code or renew our cultural code so it better supports the business and also taps into the energy of the people and also defines what's great and what's poor. What can we rally behind in terms of a 1-degree shift that will really make a difference? What do we need to do from a leadership development perspective, particularly 360s, so that we can lead from the front in terms of executive leaders and leaders? How do we, or what do we need to reinvent from a systemic perspective? And the 7th one is around, well, organizations don't change, people do. So what are those little shifts, those laughably small changes that we can encourage to create a sea change that links to the 1-degree shift in our business? So let's look at the first 2 around assess. So assess. We look at it from a values lens. We find that it's helpful if we look at assessments from a values lens. Organizations are dynamic versus fixed. And if we want to create meaningful change in the world, how do we create meaningful change within our organizations? So I'm not sure how many of you know about Barrett's. They're a great organization. They're based in the US. They also have a UK organization. They work with 7,000 plus, probably now about 8,000 or 9,000 organizations globally. And so we partner with them to help conduct culture assessments that gives us a measurement. They're a great, great organization. They just did a global survey with a few thousand people. And I just thought I'd quickly share a few themes. So there's some meta level shifts going on in the world today around values. And Barrett's identified 3. The first is this pre-COVID high performance focus, more on that orientation, moving now towards more of a premium on adaptability, agility. So from high performance to more adaptability, how do we shift? From sense of alignment, teamwork, to much more emphasis on well-being. In my conversations over the last few months, this is a huge theme, well-being, wellness, and there's a real, we're calling it an echo pandemic on mental health, which is what I'm really worried about. How do we pay more attention to people and how they're adapting, particularly young families, to really prevent isolation? And the third theme is restrictive practices to more working together. So there's a real premium now, it seems, on agility or adaptability, on well-being, and on a different kind of teaming in our world today, in our workplaces. Barrett's measures entropy. And the simple way to think about entropy is it's friction, it's fear. So if you think about a bike, and when you ride a bike, it can be like, there's sort of rust in the chain, or there's grit in the gears. That's entropy or friction. And the simple relationship is the higher the entropy, the lower the trust. As we decrease entropy, we increase trust. Where we want to be is we want to be in the 10% less entropy range. That means it's high performing. That means it's best places to work. When we work with organizations, they're often in the 20 to 35%. So we want to pay attention to entropy. It's a proxy for trust. Barrett's has a 7-level model. I'm not going to explain it here, but it's a way, it's basically Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's a way to look at values based on levels, which gives us an additional level of insight. So I just thought I'd give you 2 quick examples of a company that with weaker culture. So you can see there's 3 lenses. There's the current on the left, personal, current, and desired. So the personal is about the personal DNA. And you'll see there's a list of values. Accountability, for example, number 1, that's 162 votes. That's the number. Level 4 is one of those level 4 dots. So then there's current, and you can see in the current, there's some good stuff like profit, safety, and then the L's are the white dots. That's where the friction is. That's the entropy, and then the desired. So we get a measure of culture, in this case, 29%, pretty high. Average is about 19, 20%. We have some good stuff in the culture. We have some challenging stuff, and we have a sense of where they want to go. So this is a higher entropy, weaker culture. This is a lower entropy, stronger culture. So you can see there's less white dots. The entropy is 14% versus 29%. So we have a way to measure the culture, and this acts as a platform for dialogue when we go and have what we call engage workshops. So it's a way to measure culture, which we love. I just actually listened to this. I'm a fan of Tamara Levitt at the Calm app, and in my meditation this morning, she quoted Sharon Salzberg, and she said this: we have to look, examine, investigate. We have to find what's really true, not just accept what someone else tells us. So how do we go in and investigate and get curious about and really understand what's really going on in the culture in terms of positive and not so positive entropy, and what the delta is with desired? So a little moment of reflection for you. I've shared with you the first couple of best practices or philosophies around assess your culture, figure out what the entropy is, what's working, what's not, what's the current, what's the desired, and get a sense of where you want to go. So here's a couple questions for you to reflect on. So just give that a little noodle for 30 seconds or so. What is a primary culture challenge for your organization? In other words, why change? What's the burning platform? These are some of the patterns that we hear in our culture work. We have more of a me versus we culture. Maybe there's a lack of candid communication. You can see some examples. So one of those might resonate with you. So what's a primary challenge? And have you measured, or do you measure your culture? Maybe just put in the chat, just yes or no. Yes, we've measured our culture in the last 6 months. We've got to measure. We have a proxy for trust or some kind of measurement. So yes, as we've measured in the last 6 months. No, we haven't. My suggestion is, if you, this is a good place to start, is to actually assess your culture, get some data, and then go have some conversations with people. What are you seeing there, Rob, as far as yeses and nos?
Yeah, so a couple of first yeses, but the majority has been on the no. It's ending off with a couple of, I'd say it's predominantly no. And while these are coming in, we went through this process actually recently as well. And it's interesting to take what your perception of what that culture is, a leader or an HR person, and then seeing what the data really says. And then when you think about convincing or having conversations at an executive level, having some of that data to back it up was super insightful for us. And we went through this as a beginning process in the assessment phase to develop our virtue world. So it is a very interesting process, and opens up a lot of or sheds a lot of light into things that may not be seen, especially the perception of your employees, not just the perception of, a couple of people in the executive team. So it is a very valuable process I've personally been through as well.
Well,
But
and do you remember what was your entropy or your friction? It was pretty good. But I don't. Carolyn, one of our colleagues, did the work with you guys. What was your entropy?
yeah,
I'm
I don't
putting on.
remember the exact number, but it was pretty good.
I
And we were in
think
a high growth culture, so
I
it
think it was
was
single digits. I think you were 7 or 8%, but I'm going by memory, and that was a while ago.
yeah. I'll
Um,
take all the credit for that, no worries.
so,
But so sorry, a couple of people like a lot more no's than yeses, but I mean, I'd say probably like 25, 75. Yes, no.
25, yes. So I think this is a good place to start for a lot of you is let's assess our culture. Let's get a sense of the current, what's working, what's not, what's the desired. Barrett's is one way to do it. There's other ways to do it, but get a good assessment and start to measure your culture just like anything else. Like you probably measure operational efficiency, you probably measure your revenue profitability. I think this is a big challenge in a lot of organizations where we don't have a language for culture. So if we start to have a measurement, what we measure matters, or what we measure we can manage. So it's a
Quick,
good place to start. And I've seen a lot of organizations then weave this entropy or this culture measure into their balanced scorecard strategy, and then you measure it. Measure it every year. So this is an ongoing process.
Tim, there's just a quick question that came up. Said, how do you measure? And then question mark, and then surveys question mark. So I don't know if it's measurement is Barrett is the only measurement, or you said there's other ones out there. Is it a survey with the employee, or are they conversations? I'm trying to get into Susan's question here.
Yeah. So the measurement in Barrett's world, it's the entropy. So the entropy is the measurement. So 19%, or in your case, I think it was 7% or 24%. And again, high average is about 18, 20% in North America. Great places to work is in the 10% or less zone. So the measurement entropy is one way, but you can also measure in terms of how people describe the culture. That's a more qualitative. So you can do it quant and qualitative, but it's really the entropy that's what we like about Barrett's. There's also Human Synergistics is out there. They're another Canadian company. They've got a totally different methodology. They're another company. And there's a bunch of others, but I did a lot of research on this 7 years ago, and I like Barrett's. And so we use Barrett's probably 80, 90% of the time for their clients.
And just to get into Susan's question, is it typically a survey, or is it a conversation, or is it both?
Thank you. Yeah. So the Barrett's is it's a survey. So you send it out, 3 questions. So you customize it. You send it a note with a link, and it asks you, what are your personal values? Pick from a list. Current, pick from a list. Desired. And then we usually throw in a couple of open-ended questions. And then you get that once a year. And then you can use WorkTango quarterly to measure how you're living your values. So we actually love that combo of the Barrett's annually and then the WorkTango quarterly. All right, let's keep rocking. So I just wanted to share with you a quick story or example of this, because sometimes, culture can be intimidating and it takes time, but we can also really create some meaningful change within 6 to 8 months. So this is Mike. Mike is the CEO of Kielhauer, great Canadian company. They design, manufacture, distribute office furniture. So chairs, tables, sofas, collections. Awesome company based in Toronto and Scarborough, about 350 people. So Mike's the CEO there. And we had a breakfast back in the end of 2016 in November, and we had about 70 or 80 CEOs and executives there. And Mike came up to me afterwards and said, Tim, I'd love to have a chat with you. We seem to have lost our mojo. I remember it, used those words. We've lost our mojo. I was like, what do you mean? It's like, our energy, there's something missing. I can't put my finger on it, but I would love to have a chat. So we agreed to a 6-month project with Mike and Kielhauer. We leveraged Barrett's leadership team values assessment, and we recognized that they had an entropy of 38%. So average is 18%. So high entropy, not good, bad. Low entropy, good. So the entropy was like twice as much as normal. There's some toxicity going on. There's some challenges. So what we did is we worked on developing a culture code. We did some 360s with the executive team. We did some micro-learning experiences monthly, really picked away at it in communication and collaboration and delegation. And then fast forward to the beginning of 2018, their entropy in this leadership team values assessment was 12%. So it went from 38%, some toxicity, down to 12% in 8 months with a clear assessment, alignment around their leadership culture, and some very specific activations. So the stuff I'm sharing with you today, assess, align, activate, it works. And then we open it up to the rest of the organization. We co-created a culture code. And they were rebranding all around comfort. So we aligned their marketing message with their cultural message. And then fast forward to June of 2018, NeoCon is the global event for this business. They won Best in Show, and it really fueled their business. So over 8 months, and it's an ongoing journey, but I think the message here is that if we assess and align and get at it, we can make a real difference in 6 to 8 months. They've had some challenges during COVID, as we all have, but they're still doing really well in a sustainable way as a business. So that's a little bit of a story. This was actually the leadership brand. Yes, we can, that sort of that inspiring kind of mindset. And then you can see their values. We talk, communication, collaborate, we trust, a little more empowerment, we get it done, we celebrate. So I'm gonna have a quick look at these two sort of together, which is culture code, and also what's the big idea, or the 1 degree shift you can rally around. That's the burning platform. So this is another one of our clients, Medline Canada, great company. They manufacture in the US primarily and distribute healthcare products to long-term care facilities and hospitals across the country. So when you think about IV bags, gloves, not the devices, but all those different supplies and products, thousands of products. About 500 people across the country. And so you can imagine they've been going crazy. Their business is way up with COVID. So we did an assessment with them, and then around the Align piece, co-created a cultural brand that really supported their strategy. And so at the core of it was this idea of together improving lives, and they really are. Their passion for purpose is about together improving lives and really making a difference. And then their values, acronym in this case, it doesn't always work, but it worked, is CARES: client experience, accountability, respectful communication, efficiency, and strengthening our people. So CARES, and at the heart of it, is all about them being a caring brand and having an impact. So that's really stuck. They've woven this into recruiting. They've woven it into their reward and recognition. So it's really a core engine of how they do things at Medline. But that's not all. This is the part of the secret sauce in my experience. And if you haven't done this, I highly encourage you to get at this work, is to define what we mean by these values. So for example, accountability, instead of just saying accountability, we own it, let's get specific about what great looks like. And you can see some examples there. And what is it not? What's poor? So that it's coachable. So how do we create cultural codes that are coachable? Cultural codes that are coachable, so that it's living and breathing rather than it's on the shelf. So that's, in our experience, part of the magic. And then we can call out those bad behaviors too. So let's make it clear, compelling, but also coachable. So that's an example of and this is just another example of MasterCard Canada for values. Sort of their big idea was about all in, really getting behind that accountability value. And you can see what those are, and they have supporting values as well. So couple of questions, a little reflection for you. How clear is your culture code? And does it include behaviors, or are they just values? So how clear is it? And does it have behaviors as well as the core values? And was it done in an inclusive way? Did we get some representation from the front line, people leaders, sort of a diverse group to co-create that? And how clear is your desired state? Is there a two? Creating more accountability, or we want to create more of a we culture, or we really want to work at the diversity thing, whatever that is there clarity? So a few questions for you to reflect on there.
Hey, Tim, just to chime in, there was a question here from Sharon. It appears the approach may be best for large companies, and there are only 40 employees. So would it work for that size company? And when we went through this process a long time ago, we were a small company as well, and it works. And I think it's actually easier to instill that at your core base, and that desired state becomes so much more important because you're likely growing. But personally, I went through it as a small company too, Sharon, and I found a lot of value in it. But Tim, I don't know if you have any insights there.
Yeah, I think these are principles and practices that work if you are a team of 10 or 12 to an organization of 40, like we work with organizations in 40 or 4,000. We typically work with sort of 400 to 4,000 people companies, and all the way up to, we've done a big project with USC, University of Southern California, this year, and it's taken a while, but that's 65,000 people. So these principles and practices will work, whether it's a team of 10, and you can do it like at a functional level, HR group, HR finance services group, or a smaller org, or a mid-sized org, or a large org. We've applied this process and practices to all of those. So yes, Sharon and team, this works for whatever size. Activate. So this is something I'm super passionate about, is that back to leadership and culture I don't think we can separate it, because it's part of the same equation. A lot of the times culture is about the executives and the people and the leaders. I think everybody's a leader, by the way. I think it's a mindset, but we do need to pay attention to what the leaders are doing, executive leaders primarily. And there's a bunch of tools out there. We love the Leadership Circle, theleadershipcircle.com. We've got a bunch of certified Leadership Circle focused folks. It's mindset and behavior focused. It's got a huge database, tens of thousands of people. And it looks at both creative competencies, like these ones, and it also looks at reactive competencies, like these. And what I've learned is that we all will have a default of reactive style when we're under stress. For me, it's controlling. I'm an A-type, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a bit of a driver. I do my best, and it's a work in progress to really soften the controlling. Some people comply and they don't speak their truth. Some people protect, but I love this tool because it helps identify for us as a leader where our go-to default under stress is. And we can start to manage that. Again, that's getting into the value belief level versus just the foliage. Second from final is systems. And we could spend a whole webinar on this alone, because this is complex work, but if we don't try to tackle it, we probably won't create transformational, sustainable change. So back to this picture, the systems are on the bottom. So if this resonates with you, I would highly encourage you to go get curious over the summer, maybe get some business leaders and go get curious about what's the number one system that is not optimized, that does not support our desired culture, that is not supportive of our strategy. So if you've got some silo mentality, it might be in your org design. If it's around fulfillment, it might be rewards recognition. It might be, I see a lot at times it's about communication and just making sure there's ongoing two-way dialogue, strategic dialogue. It might be performance management. It might be recruiting. It might be comp. Let's not try to do boil the ocean, but let's tackle these, in a robust way, one at a time. Like org design, as you all know, HR leaders here, that's a 6 to 12 month exercise. So if you feel work is needed there, just align it with your desired culture. So that the takeaway here is, let's pay attention to systems, one, maybe two, but let's really try to just, reinvent, disrupt, optimize a system so that it's in concert with the, because that's what's in concert with a culture. A lot of times the systems are actually what are holding the organization back. Finally, and then we'll get some questions, is organizations don't change, people do. And 1 degree shift is our name. And we believe, let's be clear about the strategic 1 degree shift, whatever that is, higher accountability, more open communication, more diverse, whatever that is, and combine that with laughably small behavior changes with people. So it's a combination of big 1 degree shifts organizationally and little 1 degree shifts at the behavioral or individual level. And I just love Michael Bungay-Steiner. I know that Rob and Stephen, you had Michael on. He's just written a great book, The Advice Trap, for those of you who haven't read it. It's a great book. But Michael has this simple model for behavior change that I love. A lot of you have probably seen it, but it's about small C change. It's about X, Y, Z, trigger, current, and new. And this is actually how I became a daily meditator. I was really struggling with it. And then when I learned this formula, I applied it. So here's how it works. Trigger, it's either location or time-based. So for me, I wanted to figure out when I was going to meditate every day. And I decided, well, it's got to be in the morning, and it's got to be around my coffee. That's a daily ritual. So time-based, when my coffee is percolating in the morning, that's the when, that's the X. Current habit, instead of checking my email, that's the Y. Instead of, I'm going to meditate for 10 minutes. X, when the coffee is percolating. Y, instead of checking email. Z, I'm going to meditate for 10 minutes and give the gift of space for myself so I can show up and be as good as I can be for that day. So how can we align individual behavior change with desired organization? This to me is actually what's missing in a lot of organizations. there is a disconnect between personal change and organizational change. Let's make those links, people. That would really make a difference. So there they are, the big seven. Let's call them the sexy seven. I don't know why. The big seven, the sustainable seven of transformational culture principles and practices. And before questions, I'd like you to do yourself a service and write down what's one key commitment takeaway. What's one key commitment? So if you look at these 7 practices, what's one thing that's really resonated with you that you want to go and apply and get curious about? And I hope you apply that. Rob, let's get some questions.
Awesome. Thanks so much. By the way, I love the organizations don't change, people do. I'm completely stealing that. And I fail miserably at the daily meditation practice. And I get 2 or 3 days and then I fail. And it's been a struggle for like a year. And the XYZ, in terms of what I'm going to take away, I'm really going to try to instill that because there's a lot of things I can do while the espresso machine is plugging away. So I really like that.
You like to do it in the morning? You like to meditate in the morning?
Yeah, preferably.
Can you do it? How long does it take your espresso? It doesn't take as long. That's the thing.
Yeah, also true. I got to figure something else out.
No, but I find that the moment, the when is actually critical. So it's in anything. Like can I layer on that for a minute? Like, for example, if you've got a leader who really needs to work on listening, it's like in meetings, X. Instead of talking all the time, I'm going to just do my best to be quiet and ask a question and listen. So I think when the trigger for individual change is critical.
So thanks so much for that. Really good framework, a lot of good questions. So we're going to dive to those. And there's a kind of an upvoting part here. So I'm going to try to take some of the ones at the top, but I think we can get through them all that are here right now. I think there's some really good ones. But first things first is from Betsy, to what extent do you think these COVID related shifts will stick? I.e., what does the historical look back tell us about how likely wellness, for example, will continue to be seen as a critical component of our culture?
Yeah, beautiful. Well, I'm not a clairvoyant, but here's my sense. And it's a sense / hoping for. Adaptability, which in Barrett's world is a level 4 value, this notion of needing to be more adaptable and flexible, I'm hoping that's here to stay. There's no question that the move to hybrid of remote and needing to look over people, that's here to stay. I think that's one piece. And adaptability, I think. I'm really hoping the well-being, Rob and Betsy, is one here to stay. But I think we need to have some systems to help with that. So I believe that unless we have, it's back to that behavior belief and system combo, we probably can't create sustainable change. So just on the well-being example, people are paying attention to it more now because it's more burning, young families, isolation, anxiety levels have quadrupled. So I think it's more on people's radar now, but unless we're willing to create a system or two within the workplace that can sustain that, I fear that is only going to be non-sustainable. So I'm hoping that the adaptability, the wellness, and the autonomy in particular will stick, but I think we need the systems to help it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people agree with you on that, that hope that it's going to continue moving forward. So thanks for that. And thanks, Betsy. Another one from Victoria. How would you suggest to promote a culture shift adjustment from the bottom up? So maybe a little more on that activation level. And I have some ideas and experience in this as well, but I'll let you start.
Yeah. Like first of all, I mean, the work that we do, it's always, or we just won't do it. It's a collaboration between the CEO and the chief people officer. A couple of executives at least that want to look at this strategically is part one. So it's a partnership, and then it's the survey. So whether you use a Barrett's, whether you leverage a partner like WorkTango to bubble up the themes, because I'm actually surprised generally at how out of touch a lot of executives are with the real issues. And so the meaningful change, I think we need to be in tune with the people. And if we do that through an anonymous survey, we get a sense of what some of the themes are. We can then report back and engage the executives in this. Here are a few positives, here are a couple of concerns. What are we going to do about it? So I think you need that top-led but inclusive energy in the system. You kind of need both. What's your sense on that, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of how to promote a cultural shift or adjusting from the bottom up, I think once that they're established and you're getting into activation stage, I mean, I spent 11 years helping companies with strategy execution of recognition in an organization. And when recognition is the fundamentals of it is based on your virtues or values, now it's not a top down, this is what we need to believe or what we need to do. It's now everyone groundswell are recognizing people for those behaviors, amplifying what's important in an organization. So I've seen it impact cultures, improve people's recall, and even, kind of understanding of what the virtues or values are. And that's a really good way I've seen that bottoms up type approach, because it's not being done to them. They're actively sharing and why that's important and recognizing those behaviors. What gets recognized gets repeated, right?
Yeah, it's not being done. It's being, we're doing it with. And the other thing I would just add, just to be explicit, is the communication part. So I'll just give one example because it's live. We're partnering with a great organization, Almag right now, aluminum extrusion. They do some really cool, innovative, what nobody else will do extrusions, like the street signs in Toronto or municipalities. They're shifting their operational model in the fall. So they're going to redo their measurement. They did it almost 2 years ago, and they're doing it now because they're doing it in concert with this operational shift. So the communication part of, we're going to assess, we're going to analyze, we're going to see a few things that we need to do better, different, link it continental, and there's a few communication pieces moving forward with the project. That's really important, so that people feel like they're part of it rather than it being done to them. So the communication is the other part that I would just add. That's critical. You're on mute, Rob.
I think this is my first time using Zoom. There was another question that was kind of similar, and want to see if you have any thoughts on this, but it says, how do you involve individual contributors in defining the culture? And I know that they would be part of that assessment, et cetera, but is there anything else from Kathy's question here?
Yeah. So one thing that we do probably 80% of the time, I try to encourage it 100% of the time, is we get a culture crew together. So a culture crew is a group of 10 to 12 in that range, 10 to 12 folks that are culture carriers, some people leaders, some frontline folks. And they report directly to CEO and chief people officer. So these are folks that can help, once you got the assessment, they can help unpack it. They can lead some engaged workshops. So we have a group that represents the people. They're cross-functional, they're diverse. There's a lot of positive folks. Maybe there's some naysayers in that group. So they're representative of the people. So the culture crew, and it's not a social team. This is a strategic group of people that are empowered, have some dollars to guide the culture change and guide the culture. So the culture crew, once you hit organizational size of around 100-ish, 80, 100, the culture crew is a very good idea. And you keep them together for a year, and then you refresh half of them for the next year. So they're an ongoing group to help with engaged workshops, activate key priorities, work directly with the executive team.
Great. All right, a lot of other ones just came in, so it doesn't look like we're going to get through them all, but with 6 minutes left, we're going to do our best. This was interesting. You talked about like some of the changing kind of worlds around us, not only on the COVID situation, but a lot with the Black Lives Matter movement and DEI. And this question is, where does consideration of microaggressions fit within your model?
Microaggressions?
Yeah.
So microaggressions meaning bullying? Is that how you interpret that?
Yeah, or I think, that's probably the best way I can define it. To be interested if Harry, you have any other context, you can throw that in there. But yeah.
Here's my observation is that 95%, maybe 96% of organizations are a very traditional command and control kind of hierarchical system, which encourages controlling, and controlling too far is bullying, is microaggression, or is aggression. So, and it's a bit of it's symptomatic of a much broader problem of this command and control hierarchical traditional system that's been around since the 1800s. It's dated. And so it doesn't defend people from acting in an overly aggressive bullying way, but unfortunately the system promotes that. So I'd say that to answer the question directly, does it address Yes, it does, because we see in the survey with Barrett's anyways, we see things like bullying, that comes up, and it depends on the side, the voice of it, but we pay attention to that and we share that back we want to see where that's going on, what functional areas, so we can drill down to the sort of the department area. But we want to pay attention to what's going on there. And it's a systemic thing, but it's also a leadership thing. So a big theme in our culture work is empowering. How do we trust and, cast forth a vision and be clear, but also co-create and collaborate and create trusting organizations? That's what people want. So to answer the question, yes, the Barrett's does address, because it gets descriptors of entropy. So it could be control, bullying, exploitation, cost reduction, silo mentality. Those are just some of the examples that might come up in the Barrett survey.
Great. Thanks for that. All right, chugging along here. Really good questions. Thanks, everyone. This is from Fatima. How do you create a truly inclusive culture when people are so complex with their different interests, focus areas, and requirements? Adding to that, how do you avoid conflict and effective change management while transforming the culture? Probably have an hour on this one, but what comes to mind?
Well, I think there's a couple of questions in there. So the first one's about inclusion. So I think you want to co-create the cultural cohort, or renew and get people's input. So that's inclusion. Maybe you, number one. Number two, maybe you have a value that calls out inclusion. Maybe it's DEI. Maybe it's empowerment. So is there an inclusive kind of value that energizes that, and so people pay attention to it? So that's the inclusion part. The second part of the question again was, Rob?
Adding to that, how do you avoid conflict and effective change management while transforming the culture?
Okay, let's not avoid conflict. Conflict, it's back to invite love and fear. Radical candor. So if you haven't read that book, or go watch a video of Kim Scott talking about radical candor. Challenge directly, care deeply. What we see a lot in cultures is there's actually conflict avoidance. That's not good. It's just like if you got a problem with your partner. I mean, my wife is very good at this. If there's an issue, she's much better than I am at raising it. If there's issues, we need to raise it in a respectful way. So I believe, actually, my experience is that we actually want to lean into conflict and focus on radical candor. And maybe there's a value around radical candor or open communication, or conflict avoidance actually creates it promotes more problems than it does solutions, in my experience. It's a tricky one. I'm not saying it's easy. This is hard, right? Like going into those niggles or having those tough conversations is a skill. It's hard, and it's critical to meaningfully shift cultures.
Yeah. And that's why I said probably could be a long conversation on change management. The only other advice I've seen in many change management initiatives is this isn't a moment in time. Right? Like this is like a consistent, whether it is some level of measurement or keying in or focusing, it's just, you don't do it once and it just happens. You kind of have to continue the understanding and sentiment as time goes on.
Well, and in change management, what should be the first step? It's like, what's the problem you're trying to solve? What's the problem? Yeah. What's getting in the way? There's going to be lots of good stuff, but culturally, that's why I started at the front end, what's missing? So if we're not able to define a burning platform or some kind of problem, it's going to be incremental change at best. It's not going to be transformational change.
Okay. Great. Another really good question from Jeff. How vital is stable senior leadership in these culture change transformations? And I'm not going to put words in Jeff's mouth, but you said these take a bit of time, right? So I think it's a really good question on how vital is the stable senior leadership through these transformations.
How important is a stable, or how
vital is stable senior leadership?
Yeah. Well, as the saying goes, organizations don't change, people do. And a lot of times in the culture work, it's some executives that need to commit to one or two meaningful shifts if they want to create, so I'd say what's most important is not stable leaders, but is actually open leaders that have an appetite for learning and growing and getting better. If we have that, and in my experience, if leaders are up for it, if they have an appetite, amazing. If there's closed-mindedness, don't even go there. Work on that first. Like, how do we create an openness? So stability is important, but it's the appetite for change and a willingness to dig in and be vulnerable and realize that, I'm not perfect. I got work to do here. Like, if you look at Mike Kielhauer, he's like, we've lost our mojo. I know I got to work on my communication and got to work at that. Okay. So we start first in being vulnerable and being courageous with the change. That's what really fuels meaningful and sustainable growth. You're on mute. We can hold each other accountable, Rob. It's great.
I love it. Thanks. And I'm doing too many things here, trying to talk and read and do all this stuff. Anyway, so what I was trying to say was I want to be very cognizant of people's time and respectful because it's 2:01 right now. I do understand we didn't get to all the questions and apologize for that. If anything, that's a good kind of signal that there was a lot of interest in this topic. And I think it was a lot of thought-provoking items that you provided there, Tim. So thank you. There are a couple of questions here that are asking things like, do you do work in Africa with certain industries, et cetera? What we'd probably do is follow up with some of these folks as well.
Sure.
Post best next step. But what I did want to do is just a couple of thank yous. First, just the WorkTango team, all the effort and time to get these happening it's a lot of effort in the back end, and Steven's sitting in the back end, not getting the glory of being on screen, but gets all the work done. Everyone who joined today in our community, you guys are awesome. I mean, just the ability to take time to better ourselves, we call it kind of improve your craft, is awesome. And just the ability, the amount of questions, comments are amazing. So thank you all for joining, keeping this going as powerful as it is. And lastly, just to you, Tim, so much good insight, years of wisdom, ways to frame things, little nuggets, probably the best voiceover thing I've ever seen in a presentation. And I do a lot of these webinars, so that was impressive to me. I mean, that's awesome. But I just wanted to thank you for donating your time. I know you're a busy guy, but I really appreciate the efforts and being with us today.
You're welcome. Well, thanks everybody. I will put together a really short deck, Rob, that you can include in Stephen in the follow-up. And there's a few books I mentioned, so I'll do my best to remember which ones I referenced.
Sounds good. Well, to everyone.
I'm happy to, Rob, I'm happy to, with the first 5 people that flip me a note, I'm happy to have 5 or 7 discovery meetings just to help you sort of move, with anybody. So just flip me a note, tim@1-degree.ca, tim@1-degree.ca. So happy to have a few discovery meetings with folks here.
And all that will be sent to people in an email shortly. I know the team's already probably on it once we get to the recording of all this. But again, just a big thank you. Everyone have a safe and awesome rest of the Thursday here and an awesome week. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Yep.